The movie opens with Goreng, who awakens in a prison known as the Vertical Self-Management Center. He is inside a concrete cell marked with the number 48 on the wall. His only amenities are a bed and a sink, and at the center of the cell lies a large hole, which his cellmate Trim refers to as the pit. Hundreds of identical floors extend above and below them, each housing 2 prisoners who use pseudonyms assigned by the management. Every day, a platform laden with food descends through the hole, stopping briefly at each floor. Prisoners have 2 minutes to eat as much as they can before the platform moves on to the levels below. The lower your floor, the slimmer the chances of finding anything edible. At the end of each month, the prisoners are randomly reassigned to new floors. When Goreng first sees the platform, he refuses to eat, does not feel hungry, and prefers to leave food for those on the lower levels. After finishing his meal, Trim spits on the leftovers, reasoning that those above likely do the same. Goreng attempts to save an apple for later, but the cell begins heating up dangerously once the platform departs. Trim explains that keeping food is strictly forbidden, and failing to comply results in a fatal temperature increase. Reluctantly, Goreng discards the apple and reflects on the interview he underwent prior to entering this prison, where he signed a contract agreeing to remain inside for the predetermined period, with no possibility of an early exit. Each prisoner is allowed to bring one personal item, and Goreng chose a copy of Don Quixote. He entered the prison voluntarily, intending to serve 6 months in exchange for a diploma. The next day, when Goreng once again refuses to eat, Trim expresses frustration, believing that a spot on floor 48 is wasted on him. Goreng asks about Trim's past, and the older man recounts his story. After being angered by a TV advertisement for a new and improved knife that overshadowed the one he had just purchased, Trim threw his television out of a window, taking out a passerby. Given a choice between a psychiatric hospital and the pit, he chose the latter. Trim reveals that the lowest floor he's experienced is 132, adding that even lower levels exist, as he saw them from above. No food reaches those depths, and while 1 month on a low floor is survivable, 2 consecutive months at the bottom are deadly. When Goreng suggests urging others to ration food, his attempts to reason with neighboring floors are ignored. Trim scoffs, retaliating by urinating down onto the lower floor. He also reveals that his personal item is the knife he bought after seeing the advertisement. Later, when the platform returns, Goreng finally starts eating. He also witnesses a person from the upper levels fall through the hole. Trim comments nonchalantly that such incidents are common and no one will intervene. Trim recounts all the floors he has been on and casually mentions to Goreng that they'll remain cellmates in the next cycle. This realization makes Goreng understand a chilling truth. Cellmates are always kept together during shuffling, and Trim must have cannibalized his previous cellmate to survive the lower levels. When the platform descends again, it carries Miharu, a woman sitting amidst the remnants of the feast. Goreng notices she's injured and expresses concern, but Trim dismisses her presence, urging him to ignore her. He explains that Miharu descends the levels each month, searching for her missing child. To increase her chances of survival and reuniting with her child, she slays every cellmate assigned to her. Trim theorizes that the falling man Goreng saw earlier was likely one of her victims. Trim goes on to clarify that, unlike Miharu, he's never slayed anyone. He has only consumed the bodies of those who fell onto his floor. As the platform moves to the next level, the prisoners below attempt to attack Miharu. Goreng shouts at them to stop, but it proves unnecessary. Miharu swiftly takes them out and calmly returns to the platform. When the month ends, prisoners are rendered unconscious by gas and relocated. Goreng awakens tied to his bed on floor 171, far below where any food might reach. Trim, standing over him, explains that he bound Goreng because the younger man is stronger, making him a threat. Their bleak reality becomes increasingly apparent as the platform arrives completely bare, and the desperate cries of prisoners on neighboring floors fill the air. After 8 days of starvation, Trim declares it's time for him to eat. Despite Goreng's desperate pleas, Trim uses his knife to slice meat from Goreng's thigh. Before he can eat, the platform arrives, this time carrying Miharu. Remembering Goreng's kindness, Miharu attacks Trim, using his own knife to incapacitate him. She then frees Goreng and hands him the knife, allowing him to finish Trim off. Goreng passes out before he can fully process what's happened. When Goreng awakens, he finds himself bandaged with a torn piece of bedsheet. Trim's lifeless body lies nearby, and Miharu, who has remained by his side, is eating the remains. She offers some meat to Goreng. After some hesitation, he accepts, and she also gives him water before leaving silently on the platform. In the following days, Goreng endures his grim circumstances. As Trim's body begins to decompose, Goreng resorts to consuming worms to sustain himself. His isolation and guilt take a toll, and he begins hallucinating Trim's ghost, who mocks and judges him as he eats. When the month finally ends, gas once again fills the cell, and Goreng drifts into unconsciousness, dreaming of being with a woman while Miharu observes. Upon waking, Goreng discovers a new cellmate, a dog licking his face. To Goreng's shock, his new cellmate is Imagwiri, the woman who conducted his interview when he volunteered to enter the prison. Her chosen item is a dog, and they find themselves on level 33, significantly better than their prior position. Goreng recalls the day of his interview, and how unsettling Imogiri's long pauses between questions were. Now, in the present, Imogiri explains that, like Goreng, she volunteered to be there. Believing in the administration's intentions, she insists she didn't know people perished in the facility, and says that, to her knowledge, there are only 200 levels. When Goreng tells her there isn't enough food for everyone, Imogiri argues that the food would suffice if prisoners only ate what they needed. She insists that fostering a spontaneous sense of solidarity could solve the problem, but Goreng finds her idealism absurd. He darkly speculates whether real change would come from something as drastic as the demise of a child, but Imogiri confidently refutes this, claiming company policy forbids children under 16 from being in the prison. When the platform arrives with food, Imogiri demonstrates her philosophy by eating only enough to sustain herself and giving a portion to her dog. She carefully divides the rest into 2 rations and tries to convince the prisoners below them to follow her example. Eat the portions she prepared and prepare 2 more for the next level. Unsurprisingly, her pleas are ignored, and Goreng sarcastically points out that the administration doesn't actually want solidarity among the prisoners. This upsets Imogiri, who defends her former employer, stating that her years of service there were unproblematic. Goreng retorts that her role as a former employee gave her privileges, like selecting her cellmate. Undeterred, Imogiri continues her efforts daily, though she's constantly ignored. After 2 weeks of shouting into the void, Goreng grows tired of her relentless idealism and resorts to a more practical tactic. He threatens the prisoners below. If they don't follow Imogiri's instructions, he'll defecate on their food every day, forcing them to eat contaminated scraps. The threat proves effective, and the prisoners begrudgingly begin passing the message downward. One day, the platform descends carrying Miharu, unconscious and badly injured. Goreng and Imogiri pull her off and place her on a bed, tending to her wounds. However, while they're distracted, the dog steals a portion of the food. As soon as the platform leaves, the cell begins to freeze, punishment for breaking the rule against hoarding food. Desperate to avoid passing, Goreng chases the dog and retrieves the stolen food just in time. That evening, Miharu regains consciousness. Goreng generously offers her the bed while he sleeps on the floor. When he wakes, he finds Miharu and Imogiri fighting violently. It turns out Miharu took out the to eat it. The next day, Miharu departs on the platform. Goreng shares Miharu's story of searching for her child with Imogiri, but Imogiri counters with a grim truth. Miharu came alone 10 months ago. She was an actress without a family who, like Goreng, volunteered to enter the prison. Imogiri reveals her own guilt, explaining that she had sent people into this facility without understanding the horrors it contained. Diagnosed with terminal cancer 3 years ago, she initially volunteered in hopes of making a difference. But now, burdened by despair, she has lost that hope. On their final day on floor 33, Goreng urges Imogiri to eat, knowing there's no guarantee of food tomorrow. But Imogiri, overwhelmed by depression, refuses to leave the bed. The following morning, Goreng wakes to find they've been shuffled to floor 202, far below where food ever reaches. This shocking revelation, that there are more levels than Imogiri believed, proves too much for her. She uses her bedsheets to end her life. Goreng, devastated, begins hallucinating once more. Trim's ghost reappears, taunting him with the idea of consuming Imogiri's body. Imogiri's ghost and her dog join the haunting chorus, urging Goreng to do what's necessary to survive. Goreng struggles to resist but finds little solace in distractions, eating pages from his copy of Don Quixote and using a broken plate shard to count the days on the wall. As starvation sets in, he ultimately gives in to Trim's guidance, cutting Imogiri's body for sustenance. When the next shuffle occurs, Goreng is relieved to find himself on floor 6, high enough for food to reach. He initially believes his new cellmate is Miharu, coming after him with a knife, but wakes to find it was just a dream. His actual cellmate is Baharat, an optimistic man whose chosen item is a rope. Baharat, filled with hope, believes he can climb to the top from their position. He asks the couple on level 5 for help, and they teasingly agree to assist. However, as Baharat climbs, one of them humiliates him by defecating on his face. Stunned and disgusted, Baharat lets go of the rope and begins to fall, but Goreng catches him just in time, though the rope is lost. When the platform arrives, Goreng and Baharat eat in uneasy silence, disturbed by the sounds of the couple on level 5 engaging in intimacy. As the days pass, Trim and Imogiri's hallucinations return to torment Goreng. Trim praises him for enduring and reminds him he only has 1 month to go, while Imogiri emphasizes that change doesn't happen spontaneously. Inspired, Goreng devises a plan. He convinces Baharat to join him in distributing the food fairly across the levels. They break apart a bed, fashioning weapons from its metal parts, and leap onto the platform. As they descend, Goreng explains that no food will be distributed to the upper levels because they are already well fed. The first rations will go to level 50 and below, where hunger begins to take its toll. Bharat hesitates at first, particularly when they encounter people he considers friends, but quickly realizes Goreng's point as the prisoners above lash out angrily. Together, they enforce their system of rationing, keeping the upper-level prisoners away from the food. As they descend further, Bharat is stunned to see Brambang, an elderly man he deeply respects. Brambang approves of Goreng and Bharat's mission, but he offers a sobering perspective. The administration lacks a conscience and will be indifferent to their success. However, the workers on level 0 might notice if they send a symbol back up. Brambang suggests choosing a luxurious dish as the message, something that will make an impact if it returns untouched. They settle on the panna cotta, a decadent dessert that would stand out among the carnage, and commit to protecting it. The mission continues as Goreng and Bharat descend on the platform, guarding the panna cotta while rationing food to the lower levels. At level 50, they begin distributing meals to grateful prisoners. The plan seems to gain momentum, but as they reach level 97, they encounter a disturbing scene: a sickly old man and a mentally disabled boy. Goreng tries to help the old man eat, but the boy dismisses the effort, revealing he plans to take out the man later to survive. The subsequent floor holds only a corpse, which Goreng presumes is where Miharu was most recently placed. The platform doesn't stop there, reinforcing the grim truth. There are more floors than Goreng's calculations predicted. Further down, they come upon a brutal scene. Two men attacking Miharu. One wields a sword, while the other is a hulking brute. Despite Goreng and Bharat's intervention, the fight is harrowing. Bharat manages to defeat his opponent and aids Goreng in slaughtering the larger man, but they are too late. Miharu has succumbed to her injuries. Goreng wants to grieve her loss, but Bharat pulls him back onto the platform before it descends without them. They resume their descent, handing out food where they can, though many floors hold only corpses. At last, the platform stops at level 333, seemingly the lowest level. The cell appears empty, until they notice a child hiding beneath the bed. Molly, the missing child Miharu had been searching for. Goreng and Bharat approach the terrified girl. As soon as they step off the platform, it resumes its descent into darkness. Goreng suggests throwing the panna cotta into the void to send their message, but Bharat refuses. To their surprise, the room doesn't punish them with heat or cold. After much deliberation, Bharat gives the panna cotta to Molly, symbolically prioritizing the living child over their original plan. The trio remains on level 333, but Goreng is increasingly plagued by haunting visions of Trim, Imagiri, and now Miharu. As Bharat's injuries worsen, he too begins to echo the ghost's sentiments, declaring that Molly herself is the message. When Goreng awakens, he discovers Bharat has succumbed to his wounds. When the platform returns, Goreng takes Molly and steps aboard. The platform descends into total darkness below, before rising back up. On the way up, Trim's hallucination reappears, urging Goreng to step off the platform because he isn't part of the message. Goreng follows his vision's advice, leaving the platform and watching as it ascends with Molly, carrying her toward level 0. The hope lingers that Molly, as a living and undeniable symbol of the truth, will force those above to confront the horrific reality of the pit.